I'm thankful to be here. I'm thankful to be here this morning. It's good to be together as we continue walking through this series, these 7 deadly sins. We're kind of reminded, as Marcus talked about, this family growing together thing is sometimes exciting and it's engaging, and we see really important, necessary things about life and what's happening. It's like, man, this is great, all this growth, and sometimes it stings a little. Sometimes growing is painful. Sometimes we're challenged in places that we don't want to be challenged in. We're called up to things we don't want to be called up to. We're called out on things we don't want to be called out on. And I think this series has been one of those ones we don't like so much. It's just been tough. I feel like, at least personally, it's just been like punch after punch with this thing. Now, part of that is because these big categories, they're this way on purpose. The study that's been done and looking at the human heart and looking how we interact with sin, they've come up with these 7 deadly sins, or these 7 what's called as capital vices. Meaning from these things, it's not just some bad decisions we got to watch out for, but actually from these, when our hearts are shaped by them, if we allow them in, they'll actually carve these ruts into our heart. They'll reshape it. And from those comes all the other sins. It's like there's all these symptoms that we worry about in life, but when we get down to the actual cancer, there's about 7 of them. And they look like this. And I don't know about you, but I have, it's been tough. It has been tough. So we're scanning for these cancers, and today we scan for sloth. Yeah, buckle up. Sloth. Now, I'll be honest with you, I've been looking forward to sloth. I've been looking forward to sloth because the other ones have been close to home, and I've just been like, man, I'm kind of tired of getting beat up. And I know that I'm not lazy, and so I'm like, sloth is going to be great. I can sit here, preach to all you lazy people, feel pretty good about myself. It's going to be great, and boy, was I wrong. Because when you think of sloth, you kind of think of this guy. You think of this dude, and it's just lazy and slow and painful, and in some sense, it's also kind of cute. You're like, all right, it's funny, and lazy people are funny, and if anything, I'm like the rabbit, I'm not like the sloth, I'm like the rabbit. The frustrated, hyper one, yeah, that one defines me. The other guy, not so much. It's just this really tearing thing to sit there at the DMV and wait forever, and you just can't, That's how we view sloth, and there's a certain portion of that. It's okay. But during my study, I realized that's only the tip of the iceberg for what sloth really is. There's a huge picture of what sloth really is, and I think I might be the most slothful person I know. After studying this, I really do, because truthfully, it can look like the lazy guy. It can look like the slow-moving, apathetic kind of thing, but at the same time, it can be the most productive person you know is also the most slothful person you know. Now, that's a little confusing, isn't it? Because it doesn't have to look like this dude. Most of the time, it's not just avoiding work. Sloth is actually about avoiding pain. Sloth mostly is about avoiding hardship, about avoiding what's costly. We don't want to pay that. We just don't want to pay that. So it doesn't have to be this fuzzy, cute, slow-moving thing. Most of the time, it looks more like Phil Connors. You guys ever watch Groundhog Day? One of my favorite movies. Top 3, guaranteed. I love that movie. Phil Connors is this weatherman, and he gets trapped in the place he hates most in the world on the day he hates most in the year, right? So he's stuck on Groundhog Day in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, and he just hates it. And some mysterious thing, he has to relive this day over and over and over, and so he realizes there's no consequences. You wake up and everything restarts, and so he pursues a bunch of hedonistic experiences, everything from chasing women to robbing banks to stuff in his face, because he wakes up the next morning and nothing happened. And so he lives in this, but after a while that sort of wears off, and so he starts pursuing this one woman, Rita, and as he pursues Rita, it's not because he actually loves Rita. He doesn't love her. Now, he wants her, but he doesn't love her. And through the course of the story, he ends up getting confronted with this idea that he's going to try to get her without loving her. He tries to manipulate her, right? So he memorizes French poetry because she cares about French poetry. And he pretends to care about world peace because she cares about world peace. And he memorizes all her favorite ice creams. He does all these he tries to do this intimacy hack instead of actually being changed by love. That he doesn't become the person she needs. He's just going to fake it. See, sloth isn't about being lazy. Phil does a ton of work. Sloth is about avoiding the cost of truly loving people. That's what it comes down to. And I think that's a great way to define sloth. What I kind of ended on was a definition that says sloth is escaping love's cost of growing or changing. That love will require of you to change. It will require of you to grow. And you come up to that and you say, I'm not going to, I'm going to escape. I'm going to escape in maybe a productive way. I'm going to escape in a lazy way. I'm going to escape in a baptized way that makes me look holy. There's all sorts of ways to escape. But sloth is about escaping. We have this saying around here that if you're going to love somebody, it's going to cost you something. If you're going to love somebody, it's going to cost you something. And one of the things that love costs you is yourself. It costs you your pride. It costs you your immaturity that you have to outgrow. It costs you the fact that you need to change from your selfishness. When you love somebody, it shines these lights on your deficiencies. And when that light gets shined in there, we don't like that. I've avoided that for a long time successfully, thank you very much. We don't want to be talking about this. And so we escape. The Bible talks about sloth a couple different ways, and one of the Old Testament words for sloth is sluggard. To be a sluggard, Proverbs 26, a sluggard says, there's a lion in the road, and there's a fierce lion roaming the streets. There's no lion. They just don't want to get out of bed. The sluggard will make these excuses. They will say whatever they need to do to get out of the work that needs to be done. Because the next verse talks about him laying in bed. They just can't get up. They're not going to do it. Whatever it takes, they'll avoid it. A couple verses later, a sluggard buries his hand in the dish. He's too lazy to bring it back to his mouth. And so you have this picture of this person with their hand in the bowl of rice, or maybe in our world, in the bag of chips, and they're starving. They won't do, they have it in front of them. It's available. They could do the work, but they won't. It'll cost them too much. And so, in their laziness, they'll starve. Now, it shows up two different ways. You're saying, how do you see this sloth? When you're scanning for it, what does it look like? And it shows up in two primary ways. The first way is this laziness. Right, we see that, and that's sort of the obvious one, that people will escape work itself. But really the deeper question is why? Why are they lazy? Because there's good times to be lazy, right? There's good times to just rest. There's good times to avoid certain work. There's good times to carve out and say, we're just not going to do that. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. We're going to just be. And that can be an intentional thing. The question is, why are you avoiding this? Why are you not working right now? Because there could be a good reason. Oftentimes, we're just avoiding the cost. If I have to continue this conversation, it's going to put pressure on something I don't want to talk about. If I continue to open up, it's going to shine some light on some things that I don't want to really talk about. I'm going to escape. And I'm going to escape the work. We'll see people drop out of great opportunities because other people have just gotten a little too close. We'll see them walk out on things because, man, there's just a little bit too much pressure on me right now. I feel like this is going to require something of me. I feel like that relationship's going to require something. It's going to cost me. I don't want that. And they split. And it comes across as lazy, like, oh, they just don't want to do the work. It may be, but what's it really going to cost them? The second way it shows up is busyness. Oh man, right? That one stings. Sloth shows up as busyness. Might be new for you as it was for me, but you can be ridiculously busy and productive, but you're avoiding the most important work that needs to be done. You're doing all sorts of work, but it's not the work that needs to be done. You're doing all priorities B, priority C, priority D, but you're avoiding priority A, and you're still wrong. You're doing it because you're slothful. Because at the heart of it, you say, I don't want to pay what it costs to really do that right. I'm not going to bring that hand up to my mouth. I'm not going to get out of bed. I won't do the work on that. I won't do the work in that relationship. I won't do the work on that character flaw I have that just is pressing and I know it and I'm going to work around it. I'm just too busy. I'm too busy to do what I need to do. That's a slothful heart. That's a slothful heart. You know where sloth takes you? In Groundhog Day, Phil works pretty hard. He finally gets to this point where, he understands Rita completely. And so he's got the perfect day memorized, right? Just reliving it over and over, figuring out the next moment. And he finally gets it there. Finally, he's like, okay, now she's going to finally love me. And she just completely rejects him. She says, I can't believe this. She says, I could never love you because you'll never love anybody but yourself. And he says, I don't even like myself. And that's where sloth will keep you. Stuck between not truly loving yourself and not truly loving other people. That's where sloth takes you. It isolates you. It builds these walls and you're just, I won't do the hard thing that needs to be done to grow. And it leads you to a place of despair. And in the movie, you see that. He gets rejected, and so then the next thing is he's sitting in this armchair, pajamas all day, drinking whiskey, watching reruns of Jeopardy. And you're like, that sounds like Saturday to me. Sounds like a pretty good day. He's just stuck there. Just watching the same episode over and over every day, just watching his life go by. He can't do anything else because he's stuck in this place, wanting the feeling of love, but not willing to do the work that love requires. And that spot is where sloth will keep you until you die. I want the feeling, but I'm not willing to do the work. And so you stay. There's a guy named Buechner, and he wrote this book called Wishful Thinking. He's talking about slothful people. He says, slothful people know something is wrong. Slothful people know something is wrong. And with them, they know something is wrong with them, but not wrong enough to do something about it. Other people come and go, but through glazed eyes, they hardly notice them. They are letting things just run their course. They're getting through their lives. That last line just struck me. They're getting through their lives. I just have to get through it. I just have to sit. I just have to let it pass. I just have to keep going. I'm just trying to get through it. See, sloth is tricky because most people would never define themselves as slothful. I can call you out on pride, right? I can call you out on envy. I can call you out on anger. And you might say, yeah, I do that here and here. But most people would never peg themselves as slothful because sloth usually doesn't take all of your work ethic. It'll just take one area of your work ethic. You might be a great worker at work. You might be a great worker at church. You might have all sorts of energy for your dreams or your career or this or that. But then when it comes to your marriage, you glaze over and you watch your life pass you by. When it comes to parenting that hard kid, you glaze over and let your life pass you by. When it comes to developing discipleship relationships with people, you glaze over and let your life pass. You see, it is sloth, but it's tricky. It just steals the one piece of your work ethic. I'll give you an example, just being transparent here. We went down to Arizona. My wife's family down there went down to see Caitlin's family, and this was last year sometime. And we're sitting there, sun's shining. When was this? This was like December. Beautiful out. Kids are playing, splashing, And I was miserable. I'm sitting in this chair. Everybody's like, hey, do you want to play a game? I'm like, no. I just absolutely miserable. And I at the moment, I really couldn't tell you what it was, but I was sitting there. I'm anxious. I'm thinking about other problems. I'm thinking about work. I'm trying to work on things in my head I can't control. I'm just stirred up, and I'm utterly miserable. Looking back, I can tell you now that it was the sin of sloth that had taken control of my heart. This is what it looks like. You might not think of it as this way, but there's a guy named Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychologist who was taken into a concentration camp. And he lived through Auschwitz, and he watched many people die. He lost friends and family, and he survived the unimaginable pain that has to go along with that. But he watched different people give up on life. And he wrote a book about it. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. If you haven't read it, you should definitely. It's a great book. He's not a Christian guy, but it's incredible as he watches people wrestle with these painful things. But he realized in these camps that if people had a purpose, if they had a life to hold on to, if they had a reason outside of the camp, they would make it. And in this book, he writes about sloth in a certain way. I want you to listen to this quote. He says, "Let us consider, for instance, Sunday neurosis." Neurosis would be like a mental problem, like a depression or just think about this. A Sunday neurosis, this is what he calls it. That kind of depression which afflicts people who become aware of the lack of content in their lives when the rush of the busy week is over and the void within themselves becomes manifest. That's me in Arizona. When things finally do stop, when I'm not busy enough, when there's not work in my hands, when I can't distract from it, when I have to look in the mirror, when I have to face the void within myself, I can't handle it. I want to escape. And that's sloth. Instead of dealing with the pain, instead of dealing with the cost, instead of working on it, I want to run. I want to get busy. And some people will go the opposite, and they'll go, I just want to not think about anything. I'm going to numb. I'm going to go lazy. Right? It's a little more baptized for me to get to work. I don't have time to deal with my heart. I got to write a sermon. I don't have time to deal with my problems. No. I got to help other people. This is me. It's a problem that I've noticed that I don't want to face that pain. It's just too costly. So when you call sloth out on what it is, man, it's right there, isn't it? It's just right there in front of us. I don't think I'm alone in that. I don't think I'm alone. I think you and I, in our worst moments, we bury what God gives us. We bury it because we're afraid of what it's going to cost to do it right. That Matthew 25, if you want to flip there, I'll have it on the screen, but if you want to open up your Bibles, I want to point out this important detail in this story. It's a very common, famous parable, the parable of the talents or the bags of gold that they go and they bury these, right? The servant does, and it's kind of the classic story that, man, some people are doing well, some people aren't. There's this important detail here that Jesus is teaching his disciples about his return, about the final judgment that's going to come, and he tells this parable. The master goes away on a long journey, and he gives to his servants different amounts. It says each to their own ability. And he gives to these ones, and the one he gives 5 talents or 5 bags of gold, and one he gives 2, and the other one he just gives 1. And he says, "You're stewards." That's the obvious point of the story. It's not their gold, right? I mean, they're stewards of what the master gives them, and he expects them to be faithful while he's gone. And the first 2 servants get it. They put the master's money to work, and when he returns, he finds them to be faithful. And that's what he says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Their reward is not merely just more responsibility, but actually, he says, come and share in your master's joy, your master's happiness. They're welcomed into this. But then the parable starts to slow down pretty good when it gets to the third guy. And that's where we're jumping in. Verse 24, it says, "Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. 'Master,' he said, 'I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you.' His master replied, 'You wicked, slothful servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even when what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.'" Now, this overall story is referencing this reality of salvation, to walk with God. That some are going to waste their opportunity to invest what God's given them here on this earth by rejecting the master. But some will live in faithfulness. They'll be rewarded for that. That's the overall point here. But I want to point out this reality of slothfulness that steals away. That the first two in the story, they're bold and they're rewarded for their obedience, for their faithfulness. And then we see the one that disobeys, right? He's afraid. And in that fear, he doesn't act. In that fear, he ends up being wicked and slothful. So just connect these dots with me, okay? That all of this brings us to the point that fear is what's going to stop us from loving people well. Fear is what's going to stop us from overcoming the sloth. Fear is going to drive sloth deeper into our hearts, and it's the fear of pain. Maybe it's the fear of commitment. The fear of what it will cost to actually love this person well. The fear of what it will cost to be accountable to them. The fear of what it will cost to change yourself. How about this one? The fear of losing your freedom by committing to other people. Any part of my life that I commit to you, that say, I'm going to be a good friend to you, that's going to take from me. That's taking some of my freedom. I can't do something else because I've committed to this much. I'm going to be a part of this family. I'm going to be a part of this church. I'm going to be part of this group. I'm going to be a part of your life. All of those are commitments that say, I'm giving up some of the freedom that I could have just for me, and I'm giving it to you. And some of us will not make that. We're afraid of that. That those people can then call on you and say, hey, you said. Hey, you committed to this. Part of your life is knit to mine now. That's scary. It's scary to be called up and to be called out. That third servant, you realize he buried that gold. He could have been busy doing anything, and it would not have mattered because he wasn't doing what he should have done. That a priority. The master didn't ask, what else have you been up to? You weren't doing the thing you were supposed to do. It didn't really matter what else you distracted yourself with. And I think that's like such a heavy point. Because how many times are we called to love, and whatever it costs us to do that, it's painful, but instead we just give in to fear and we just bury that. I don't want to pay that cost. I'm just going to bury it. I'm just going to bury my marriage because that hard conversation just feels too scary. I'm just not going to deal with it. I'm going to let it pass by. I'm going to glaze over my eyes, and I'm just going to get through my life. I'm going to bury that next step of faith because that's scary, and I don't want to take it. It's going to cost me something. I'm going to bury that friendship. Yeah, I know God's given me windows to tell people about Jesus, to be that person. I'm not going to take them. I'm going to bury it so that when Jesus comes back, I won't have anything to show for it. We do these things where we bury our time. We bury it into work we don't need to be doing. We bury it into hobbies we don't need to be doing. We bury it into our phone. Every week, my phone tells me, hey, you average this many hours on your phone. And every week, I'm like, Lord, I repent. It's just, why? We're afraid. We're afraid to pay the personal cost. But what we truly miss out on, what it's actually costing us, is God's work in us. Like what he would do if we were to walk forward. See, God is not going to force blessings on us. That's not how the Lord blesses. And so he gives us these opportunities, and we miss them out of our fear. Listen, did you catch what the servant was afraid of? The third servant, did you see what he was afraid of? Master, he said, I knew that you were a hard man. So I was afraid, and I went out and hid. And if you're a good Bible student, you're like, wait a minute, that kind of sounds like the garden. That they're afraid of the Father. And so they run and they hide. That's not who God is. But that's the view, is that we would view our Creator, we would view our God as a hard man, that Jesus is scowling at us, and I have to get through this thing, and it must be bad because I don't really trust Jesus, so I have to go through it, and I guess I have to go through it alone. And then we miss what he's doing. We miss the whole purpose that you're not supposed to be afraid and hiding. He's inviting us into something. The others knew that they were going to go through this, and they would be welcomed into the joy and the happiness of the Master. That's a different view. But we're afraid. We're afraid. But that's just not who Jesus is. He's not this angry man. God is working in us to form Christ in us. Like through these hard things. That God would, think about this, God would invite you into a hard situation because you need it. You think about that. That God would allow us, that he would situate us in a place where like, man, this is hard. I don't know how to do this. I don't know. And God's like, I know. In fact, you're just stubborn enough. I need to put you in a pretty hard situation to get you to listen. You have this hard part of your heart where you're so callous, where you're so insensitive, where you're so unkind. I'm going to put you into a place that's going to kind of crack that. That he would do that on purpose. That it's actually the kindness of God renewing us. See, sloth is going to be the resistance against that disciplined transformation. I'm going to resist God transforming me. Colossians 3 says, you have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its creator. You have this new self that God is working, that he's renewing. It's a process, and he's saying, come through these things. I want to make you new, but it's going to cost you. And sloth says, no, thank you. I just don't want to be changed. I'm not willing to pay that cost. Guys, God loves you so much. Like Christ wants to be close to you. Jesus' heart is for you, and the future that God has for you is so bright. But it's through the everyday. It's through walking with him every day. He's not going to force the blessings. It's through you showing up when you don't feel like showing up. Right? And it's reading when you don't want to read, and it's singing when you don't feel like singing, and it's serving when you don't feel like serving, and it's training your heart against sloth. Each vice has its opposite virtue, right? And so we talked about pride, and the opposite would be humility. We talked about greed, the opposite would be generosity, right? Down the line. For sloth, interestingly, the opposite of sloth is perseverance. That you would just need to stay. You need to remain faithful to the end of what this love is going to require from you. And if you want to sum it up in one word, that's a good word, is to just stay. You just have to stay. When sloth is challenged in your heart, you want to escape. That's what it wants to do. It wants to let you go. You're going to escape to the shop, or you're going to escape to the field, or you're going to escape to the TV, you're going to escape to the phone, you're going to escape to the purchasing of unneeded things, you're going to escape to the fridge. Just escape. But the faithfulness, the staying, look, you have to stay. Things are hard in this moment, and that's okay. It's going to cost you in this moment, and that's okay. You have to stay in the conversation, stay in the rhythm, stay where you're supposed to. Because perseverance is God's plan to peel off some of those layers, to nurse the wounds that are there. But you have to stay. You have to get through that conversation. You have to get through this chapter. You have to work on it with the people God's put there. That's how you get changed by love. That's how God's love shows up. And I'm not talking about staying in an abusive relationship. I'm talking about staying with love, where love would care for you, where love would want what's best for you, where love would hold you accountable, where love would call you up. And it would call you out on your not so great stuff. That it would call you into a better place, being loved well. That's what I'm talking about. So I want you to pay attention to some yellow flags. Just real quick here. There's 3 yellow flags where you're like, I think sloth is down in there in my heart. I want you to pay attention to these, okay? The first yellow flag of sloth is that you want to avoid the people and places that will remind you about your identity in Christ. See, sloth knows. That little part of your heart that wants to run away, it knows. And so usually when things are starting to go bad and things are getting tough and the pressure's there and you know there's hard steps to take, you just want to escape. I just can't go. I'm not going to make it to group today. I'm not going to make it to church today. I'm not going to make it to that supper we said with those people. They're going to remind me, and I don't want to be reminded. I want to sit in my sloth. You got to be careful. That's a yellow flag. Second one, apathy towards the needs of others. Apathy that actually, man, I'm going to come up with this reason why I don't need to care for you. It's a good reason. I'm just busy with this, or you have your own people, or you have I know that's a need, and I'm sure it's really, problematic for you, but I just have reasons why I don't have to care. That's sloth. It's excusing itself from the cost of love. You know what I'm talking about? There's hard people in life. There's hard people, and it's hard to love them. And we come up with these reasons why we just shouldn't have to reach out, why we shouldn't have to care, why we shouldn't have to give. The third yellow flag is that this spiritual commitment, when it's put in front of you, it makes you feel grieved, or it makes you feel oppressed, or it makes you feel resentful. That someone would call you up, it's like this. You're invited into something, but it doesn't feel like an invitation. It feels like an attack. You ever been there? Hey, you should join our Bible study. And you're like, what are you trying to say about me? You know? Hey, you should come to this prayer thing. I pray enough, you know. When people call you into things, or they call you up to things, and you say, I just want to run from that. That feels oppressive to me. It's grieving me. And then the people that are involved in it, man, I just feel resentful that you would ask that of me. That you'd ask me to commit to that you'd ask me to give to that you'd ask me to pour out for that. I just don't want that in my life. That's sloth. That's the heart of sloth. And there's usually some signs that I want to feel love, but I will not do the work that love requires. And you fight that by staying. You have to stay. God's put you in a position on purpose, and you stay and you work through it, and you stay in the habit of reading, and you stay in the habit of prayer, and you stay in the habit of giving and serving and coming to worship with brothers and sisters and singing. You stay in these things, and they begin to change your heart. They begin to change you. It's slow sometimes, but it's important. Sloth has started to shape your heart, and you need to shape it back. And that virtue of perseverance is how that happens. So listen, we're teaching our hearts to base love. This is so important. This is the very base of it. We're teaching our hearts that love is not based on a feeling. That's based on commitment. That's a biblical principle that God would commit to us. Do you think God always feels like butterflies towards what you're doing? Do you always feel butterflies towards the people that you love? It's not based in that. It's based in a commitment that we need to say, yes, I'm going to stay. That's what love does. Love says, yes, I'm going to stay. I will see through this. And it was Jesus who said yes to the Father. You think about that. The cost of loving us was Jesus would come and he would die on the cross for us. And he said yes. And he would stay through it. And he hung there the whole time. He didn't need to. We need to say yes to what love requires of us. We aren't trying to escape the love cost. We aren't going to escape when we have pressure to grow, we have pressure to change. We want to grow. We want to change to look more like Jesus. And we have to argue that with our heart sometimes. 1 Corinthians 3 says, and we all, who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, right? So we're seeing Jesus and we're seeing who he truly is, and that's beginning to change us. We are being transformed into his image with ever increasing glory, which comes from the Lord who is Spirit. And what sloth does is says, let's tone it down on the transformation stuff. Let's just do a little more sitting. Let's just do a little bit more. That's a great conversation, but it seems like that's very expensive, and I would just rather not do it. Instead, let's talk about this. Instead, let me get you anxious about being busy. Instead, I would love for you to just think about anything else. I just don't want to be changed. But that's the cost of love. You got to change for people. You got to grow for people, and you need it. You look at the love of Jesus, you look at the work of Jesus, you look at the presence of Jesus in our lives, and he's here to transform you. That's what he's here for. And so you have to say yes to that cost. You have to say yes to growing if you want to experience what it means. So here's the thing. I was in Arizona a couple weeks ago, and I did slightly better. I did. It was slight, but it was better, right? It was okay. I did still do some work and stuff, but it was better. It was better. And a big part of that was the effort it took to calm my heart as much as I could to say, I'm okay with the silence. I mean, you run hard, and one of the reasons you run so hard is because you're trying to outrun something. You're trying to outrun your shadow, and it's going to keep following you. It takes time to sit and to listen, and you can't escape love. You won't have it. If you try to escape it, you won't have it. That's this whole thing. Just be honest. Can you sit with God? Just the two of you. Can you sit with your spouse? Just rest. Can you sit with yourself? Sloth doesn't want you to. Sloth just screams at you, escape. But Jesus invites us, stay. I want you here. That's the good news that we stay. We stay in the conversation, and we stay in prayer, and we stay in worship, and we stay where work is happening in our hearts, where love is changing us. We stay where grace is forming us. Because Jesus didn't escape the cost of love. He paid it all. He stayed willingly. He stayed through the betrayal. He stayed through the suffering. He stayed through the cross. He stayed through the grave. And because he stayed for us, we can trust him enough to stay with him.